God chose His people, the people of the Old Testament, the nation of Israel. He didn't just choose them. He didn't come to a tribe of people and say, you know what, I think I'll make you my people. He came to an elderly couple who was well past childbearing years, and He said to Abraham, and I just got to say, there are people who will read the Bible, and either they're non-Christian, maybe they're some sort of atheist or agnostic, or maybe they're even what we would call a liberal Christian. And liberalism is a mode of thought and thinking that came about in the 1800s. And liberal just means progressive. And so in many ways there's a lot of very good progressive ideas out there, like a free market. At one time that was a progressive idea. We like that. Or maybe even a republic democracy. That was a liberal idea and a brand new idea at one time. So sometimes people call themselves classic liberals because they believe in all these great American values. But theologically, in about the 1800s, since we were going through, we had just come out of the age of reason, and we were trying to reason everything to death, it was really in vogue to look at all the fairy tales and the mythology and say, well, obviously none of that's true, it's just made up stories. But then they turned their eyes to the Bible. And they saw miracles, and they saw these fantastic things happening, and they said, you know what? Now that we've studied the ancient myths of ancient cultures, we can tell that none of this was ever meant to be taken literally, that it was meant to just be stories. Stories that are good. Stories that teach you right from wrong and help you raise your children right. But come on. A flood that covers the whole world. A man spending 3 days in the belly of a whale. And so I've helped you understand what liberalism is when I say liberalism. I want you to know we are on the other side at this church, okay? And if at tonight's meeting, if all of you get together and say, actually, Pastor, we think the Bible's kind of ridiculous too, then I guess I'll go find a Bible-believing church to pastor myself, okay? Because I'm not going to be pastoring a church that doesn't believe in the Bible. Number one, if you don't believe in the power of miracles and the power of God and the power of the Bible, what are we doing here? Y'all, we could be fishing. Maybe not in this weather, I don't know, but we could be doing so many other things. We could be sleeping in. That's a favorite activity at my house. Sleeping in and all this other good stuff. But we're here today because this is life-changing. But I got a question for all those atheists, agnostics, and liberal theologians. Because if man made this up, and you see, Christianity is a very good system to live under. This whole 10 Commandments and the law of God and believing that there's a bigger thing than just you. Everyone agrees that believing in something that's bigger than just you is good for you. It's good for the community that you live in. And so it's possible that maybe mankind just works best this way. And so we came up with this system. I got a question for you. Because if that's true, that means Abraham came up with our religion. At least he was the first one. And one day, while sitting around his campfire, he said, you know what if I told everyone that there isn't a whole bunch of gods, that there's just one great unified God, and He came and spoke to me. Folks, he was 75. And when he was 100, his 90-year-old wife had a baby. And even if he had this wonderful idea, he lived thousands of years ago. Whatever idea he had, we're not going to still be living by today. And then in every generation, there is someone who picks up the ball, or the baton gets passed to them, and they pursue this idea of one God with all their might. And they change the world, and they change the community of faith. And you want to tell me that all of us people that do this, we do this out of the goodness of our hearts because it's probably just the best system to live under, the best kind of society to build? Friends, I want you to know, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think it makes a whole lot more sense if Abram was sitting around his campfire one night at the age of 75 and all of a sudden he heard from the one true and living God. The God who would take 25 years to fulfill His promise, but He still fulfilled it. He gave a 100-year-old man and a 90-year-old woman a son, and they were going to be the progenitors of God's people. And so God is active, and He brings them out of Egypt with a mighty hand, and He brings them to Mount Sinai, and they meet God on a mountain where there is smoke and fire on the top of the mountain, and everyone's afraid, and they all say, you know what, Moses, this was kind of your idea anyways. Why don't you go up on the mountain and talk to God? And Moses comes down, and they have a little dust up with a golden calf, understatement of the year, but they build the tabernacle of God. Out of all the finest gold, silver, and fine linen and fabrics that they had brought from Egypt, and they put together this thing, and they have great ceremony. They do purifying rituals once it's all built, and it's at the center of the camp, and they see the glory of God descend on this tabernacle. And they consecrate the priests, and a couple of the priests mess up, and fire comes out from the middle of the tabernacle of God and consumes them. So we learn, don't mess it up, okay? Do it right. Do it with the right attitude. Do everything. This is serious business, right? So they consecrate a couple more priests, and they have another try at it. And the cloud, this supernatural cloud, is over this tabernacle, because you don't look directly at God, right? And when the cloud gets up and moves somewhere else, that's time for only the certain people from the certain tribe, from the certain clan within that tribe, to go in there, take down some of those linens, wrap up the Ark of the Covenant, wrap up that altar table, wrap up that candelabra, wrap up all that stuff in there, the table of the showbread, wrap it up. Not everybody's supposed to look at it. It's special. And that clan of Levi hauls that stuff out. And that means the lesser clans of Levi can go in and take down the rest of the linens and the poles and wrap it all up, and they can all move. And then by tribe, all 12 of them can eventually follow that tabernacle to the new place where the cloud goes. And they lived in the very presence of God. And at night, because you can't see a cloud, it was fire. And for 40 years, they followed it through the wilderness, never having a question of what God's will was for their lives. You see the cloud? Yeah, I see the cloud. Okay, we're staying here today. But when it lifted and it went somewhere else. And they did that for 40 years. And they got into the land, and God delivered most of the land into their hand, and it was their own unfaithfulness is why they didn't conquer all of the promised land. But they get in there, and they go back and forth. Abraham's own descendants, Abraham who raised his kids to understand that there was only one God and you worship only Him, they had all the advantages, and they worshipped other gods. And God would allow plague or famine or invaders to come in and harass them, and they would finally cry out to the Lord. They would figure it out. You see, when we have hard times in our life, you can react to it in one of two ways. You can either take it to the Lord, or you actually worship something else, and so you take it to that. Maybe money will get me out of this. Back then they would have said, maybe Molech will get us out of this. Maybe Chemosh or one of the other gods. Maybe the gods of the Philistines will get us out of this. Maybe the gods of the Moabites will help our crops grow better. Maybe we should just make sure all the gods are happy. Most peoples back then, most nations and most empires thought, let's just do our best to keep all of the gods happy. That way we can keep our empire. And we're going to see today that hard times come to Israel, they don't turn to God. And they really hadn't turned to God in a long, long, long time. In fact, God lets this back and forth go on for hundreds of years. Eventually the kingdom splits. The northern kingdom of Israel, just more review because I know that repetition helps. The northern kingdom of Israel, they never really worshiped God and God alone. They never really had that revival. Oh, but they had some of the best prophets, Elijah and Elisha and all those really fantastic guys. It provides us with great Bible stories, but they saw the most miracles of God. God let the Assyrians come in and destroy them. At that time, the prophet Isaiah was ministering his prophetic ministry in the southern kingdom of Judah. And as I was reading Isaiah, and I wish I could tell you I was spiritual enough to be reading Isaiah on my own, but I've been doing morning devotions on Thursdays with the guys over at Stand in the Gap Ministries. And I've got them coming on November 17th, and I keep forgetting to announce that. But you're going to want to be here. They're ex-cons. They are recovering addicts, and they love the Lord Jesus, and they know that other programs don't help because other programs don't have Jesus in it. But they're in this program for a year, and they've, it's going to be a resource for us when we have a friend or a relative who needs a place to go to get over their addiction, to get past the fact that they're fresh out of prison and don't know what to do with themselves, and we don't want them going back into the wrong crowd. If they're willing to give up a year of their life in order to do this, and they all have jobs, that's one of the requirements. So I go there at 7 a.m. on Thursday. So much for sleeping in, right? And we read their daily Bible thing, and I help out with that on Thursdays, and it's been through Isaiah. We read through the Bible in a year, and since I'm at this point in history with my sermons, with my Bible storytelling, it's just like, oh man, let's be honest. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel are long, and they're out of order. And I usually read them and have we're going to get to Advent, we're going to get to Christmas, and we're going to read, a sign will be unto you, a child is born, and wonderful counselor, mighty God. And that's all any of us really know out of Isaiah, right? But reading through this, the prophet Isaiah announces that there will be a highway built. Just like in the hills where I grew up, they've got to make the high hills low and the valleys high so they can make one nice smooth road. And it says that's what's going to happen. The hills will be made low, the valleys will be made high, and there will be a highway for the people of Israel, even that northern kingdom, to return and pour in, because a nice wide flat road means a lot of people can travel on it. They're going to pour back into God's promised land. And just to, spoiler alert, it's really not going to happen that way. The northerners, the Israelites, the northern kingdom of Israel, they never pour back in to the promised land. In fact, if you've ever heard of the lost tribes of Israel, that's pretty much who they are. But anyways, finally, I want to drive home the fact that the southern kingdom of Judah, they got so out of the habit of turning to God that eventually, when hard times come, they turn to all of the pagans.